basically, I'm from South Africa. I moved to the UK 15 years ago, roughly, and got into the property industry, and then eventually got relatively bored of all of the property stuff. And I found that mixing people's homes and things with money and that in the investment and development game kind of started freaking me out. Like I totally get the whole thing, but I felt like there was more to life than just working with money and property. And I found the business side of property more interesting. And I was like, well, let me get into that a little bit more. And then set up various ventures along the way in that kind of property business consulting and marketing space as well. Had a few ventures that did quite well and some that didn't do very well. So I learned the lessons, but I'm still here. So hopefully something's working. But basically, along all of the way, the law seemed to be the common thread. A lot of people, in order to achieve what they wanted to do, whether it's buy property, you set up a business, scale their business, hire people, raise money, all of that kind of stuff, it always involved some kind of legal aspect. And the property industry is just rife with disputes. So I felt it was necessary for me to learn it. And I was always dealing with disputes when managing the portfolios. There's always something going wrong. So I was always dealing with solicitors, chatting to barristers. So I was the recipient of legal services and things along the way. And for some reason, the law was a passion. So I was like, you know what, let me study this. Let me take a change in my career. I just felt like things weren't going in the right direction for me. And I wanted something more exciting. Like I'm sure you can relate to this. There come points in your life when you're like, is this what I want to be doing? What changes can I make? And I had one of those moments and decided to study law and decided to do the MBA at the same time, which is probably the worst mistake, both the best decision and the worst mistake ever, because it was a nightmare. But obviously that does open the visibility of what the opportunities might be in the future and in the landscape. So I thought I should qualify as a solicitor, started doing my training contract, and halfway through realized I'm an entrepreneur. I can't work for people. I'm probably the worst employee. I'm always identifying ways to improve things. And that's not a way to get on well with people when you always have an opinion about how to improve things. So as much as I loved working there, I decided to venture out and set up new. And the gap that I identified was really bespoke, affordable legal services and legal products that enable people to do whatever they need to do as entrepreneurs. So there's so much out there. It's a hyper competitive market, and you've got amazing platforms and product services, brilliant big law firms, and everyone in between. Heck of a lot of smart people working on ways to improve the legal landscape. So it's quite a tough nut to crack. And of course, it's a regulated space. So, without going into how that works and stuff, many of you may know about a lot of that already. What I tried to do is find the gaps, and the gaps that I seem to have spotted are, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work it out, more affordable, high quality, bespoke legal advice to help people achieve what they want to do in business. And then also products that are affordable and not templates and not the existing platform stuff that we all know about. I'm avoiding that. So I'm looking at what can be done as a ready to use kind of plug and play solution. So something that people can actually build their business on. And I'll go into a little bit more about why I'm doing that and that kind of stuff. But the vision for me was really to just do something exciting in my own life, but also to get involved with other ambitious and interesting people. And I felt like the legal services industry was one that could enable that to happen. And you get to work quite intimately, for want of a better word, with founders and things like that, and join them on their journey to create a successful business. So I found that really awesome. So the real sort of objective, I guess, if you want to imagine what it might look like, is making legal services as accessible as marketing services. So at the moment, you really have to struggle to find the right kind of stuff, whereas in marketing, you can find great people everywhere. That's kind of the objective, and to do that under our banner of new. But I'm no guru in business. I've had some successes and failures, so it's navigating it along with other people. And the reason why we want to scale this internationally is because the world is incredibly competitive, and people are confined by their geographic borders. And with the advent of new technologies and AI and all that kind of stuff, the opportunities are beyond our shores. And many of you may already be doing stuff internationally, but it's not easy to do if you want to do it in a compliant way and with the right legal stuff in place or having the right advice. So that's one angle and one gap that we're looking at, where it's not really very easy to trade internationally without having the right kind of stuff in place. So we've partnered up with people in the States. That's where we're going to start with. We'll be scaling up in the States as well and replicating what we're doing. And basically, a number of my clients are people who are thinking about or already are working in the States and need to get stuff done in the right sort of fashion. So we're looking at tackling all of that. But the premise of the whole thing is to actually create kind of like the combination of Deloitte and Red Bull. So something that's a little bit more fun and enjoyable, like Deloitte. Let's give it add some personality to it. But Red Bull being the media kind of production and the excitement that comes with business. In their case, sport and adrenaline sports. We hope to do the same and make business exciting in different ways. Get involved in sports and music and things like that. But of course, the more sort of corporate and businessy stuff as well. But along with that is the actual journey of other people, part of our strategy, which is something that we're getting feedback from a lot of entrepreneurs as to what they're trying to do to stand out and do well. And this isn't legal stuff, but one of those things is video, for instance, with the evolution of authenticity. You can clone yourself and create a video, but you can't at this point create a video of yourself doing things that happen in the real world, like behind the scenes events, the kind of stuff that well, at this point AI doesn't do. And these days you'll see on LinkedIn, you'll see in ads, you start recognizing patterns and trends with AI. People are starting to subconsciously what's it called, what's the word, identify what AI produced. And you'll see those videos of someone's like this. Still, it's really easy to recreate. But as soon as you create something that's a little bit more interesting, then that's, I believe, is the evolution. So many of us are doing video anyway, but that's a big part of the strategy and for clients as well. So we're getting involved in media production for them and for ourselves. Legal stuff's expensive and rigid. It's painful to deal with, it's time consuming. And what we found is that people feel that legal service providers are quite detached from what they do. So I think this scope, we call it free the lawyer. We'd initially been looking at how we can bring in clients and then find the lawyers to service them and find the right kind of lawyers to help out and stuff. But what we realize is it's actually so many lawyers want to help people more. They don't want to bill £300 an hour. They want to be involved and be valued members of the community and help people out, but they can't because they're constrained by the system as it stands currently. So we realized that actually finding people who are people first and not, as financially driven as others, they are the right sort of candidates to kind of help us out. And in turn, that builds the culture and the energy and the values that underpin sustainable growth. So it's been a bit of a slow journey for us, and we've had to work in parallel to try and make money because we've mainly bootstrapped. I raised a bit of money, but like not much at all. And the bootstrapping is tough. So the parallel mission has been like those foundations to build a multinational, which we often neglect, don't we? Like I've made those mistakes in the past. I don't know if any of you have stopped to rethink about those foundations and the values and stuff like that and how that affects marketing and connects with your ideal clients and stuff. Like a lot of you will know a lot more about that than I do, but it's definitely something I've found some of my clients have neglected, is those foundational, more soft sort of like hug a tree type stuff, which actually makes a difference. So please do stop me anytime if I'm rambling, which I do tend to do here. Right. So yeah, the journey stuff I think could be quite exciting. But basically, we figured if we can navigate building a business in the UK, a legal services business, and navigate the regulations and then navigate international regulations, we can definitely help our clients do it. So, the other day I asked someone what it would cost to get stuff set up just to see what it would be in a territory. It worked out to about £20,000. I have nowhere near that to put into that at this point. So how do we do it? There are other ways to do it. We've had to get all our documents done for, fraction of the price of what you would be paying law firms to do it. So in that process, we worked out how to do it and how we can actually do that for clients. So we're trying to piece that together, which is an exciting part of the whole thing. But it is prohibitively challenging and expensive to get the legal stuff. I'm sure you know all about it. Next thing you know, you've got a bill of like $5,000 for doing nothing. And then, so I've got a few case studies and things that I thought I'd chat about on the legal front. But if there's anything that you can think about, Ishtar, I see you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you again, Ian. And I know we haven't been able to catch up since we both had our various migrations and remigrations. But one thing that I'm curious about is how have you niched down, if at all, in terms of specific sectors, because each sector, particularly ones that are very regulated, would have its own set of levels of complexity. So for example, in healthcare, which is where I am, developing the GDPR compliant materials, the ROPAs, the internal and external policies, I've gotten quotations for those things that have ranged from 12,000 to over 20,000 pounds to get that done. So I'm just wondering about whether in the process of thinking about expansion into the US, that's because that's like 52 different markets right there. You've really niched into specific sectors, or if you haven't, what's been your kind of go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, so brilliant question. We have niched completely. So it's digital, it's primarily digital products and ventures, B2B services and platform businesses. So kind of like your SaaS platform, digital consultancy, marketing agencies, things like that. That's been our starting point for the more productized type expansion stuff. And that's really made it a lot easier because you can actually cover a lot of those in a modular fashion. So the legal documentation, if it's like, items 1 through 10, 8 of them might be the same, and the 2 variables can be changed more easily and economically. But as soon as we branch out into healthcare, we're clueless. So it's not something we can touch. So we've had to be quite ruthless about what we can and can't do on the products front. And on the advice front, if people need, let's call it sector agnostic legal advice or services, i.e. corporate stuff like business setup or some elements of data protection, where we stay away from the regulatory aspects, we can do that. And then a lot of the stuff's been outsourced. So a lot of stuff comes our way, inquiries from different clients across sectors, and we can't deal with all of it at this point. So we've had to be very careful, and we're trying to find the right people to help us with stuff. But it's been an evolution. I'm not a technical go-to-market guy. We've kind of had to go with the flow a little bit. Good stuff. Hope that covers some of the stuff. But yeah, more to follow. Neil, go for it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Ian. Wonderful to learn more detail about your business. Just thinking about the product and service design bit, because we're all doing new things in different ways now, and everything's changing so fast about copyright, about servicing, etc. When do you feel the right time in the product and service design process should you start speaking to legal advisors? And secondly, do you think that could inform some of the decisions or even inspire some of the decisions that happen in the creative process?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a believer of front-end loading stuff. So if you want to understand like what the options are, getting as much advice as possible, distilling it and working out what route you want to take, and then doing the next bit at the next stage. I mean, it's for our stuff, it's quite heavy on getting advice in early and then along the way. As much as we provide services to ourselves, we obviously have to bring in specialists and things here and there. But for anyone else who's developing stuff and wanting to know how to piece it together from the legal side of things, then definitely as much as you can, even if it's just initial conversations up front. A lot of people are quite generous with their time, so you can find out a lot. But yeah, being clued up is going to open doors and help you not take a troublesome route. But yeah, anything more specific, I hope I covered that one all right.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. Rightio. Yeah, so some of the stuff that's been quite interesting here is I've distilled it to the three R's in business. It's risk, reward, and regret. And one of the things that stems from that is the if you may have experienced it, you've been in business for 5 years, let's say, or you've run a company for 5 years, and then you realize what you should have done or shouldn't have done, and you regret not having done it. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to make sure we get right for people is a lot of the time they regret not having put certain things in place. Like, you're not going to be able to always get all the legal advice and documents you need, but some of the key stuff, like if you're going into business with someone else, I'll go into the case studies and it's like they're funny but not funny, because people will, for example, I'll get a phone call from someone saying, okay, I've just transferred half my business to someone, can you help me with the negotiations, or can you help me put together the documentation? And then it's like, well, you've already done it, you've already given them half, so what is your game plan there? So a lot of people will negotiate stuff, and then sometimes they don't agree it in principle, they actually agree things completely. And even if it's just in principle, sometimes they set the expectations a bit too far off with the arrangements with whether it's customers, suppliers, or business partners, and then they end up in a situation where they're having to backtrack, or they end up rationalizing stuff. Oh, that's the other R, sorry. Rationalize. So they know they've made a mistake because they've given 30% to someone when they could have given 25%, for example. And then they start going, well, because they're a great person and they can open doors, I made the right decision. When in fact, just having a chat with someone at the beginning will help you understand where what pitfalls and things there are. So I found that quite an interesting one. But yeah, regretting not taking big enough risks, and regretting taking too big risks or unnecessary risks. We're trying to help people with that kind of stuff, and all it takes is a chat. There's some great people out there that can have a chat about stuff to do with legal and business. But yeah, the sort of gateway aspect of legal services, the same with business and management consulting and stuff like that. We don't know what we don't know, and I'm no guru, I'm no sort of partner at a law firm. I'm on the same journey as a lot of people, but obviously it's been an incredibly steep learning curve, because we're learning to do the stuff that people from big law firms advise people to do, basically. So I've had to sort of bend time by 10 years in some ways to catch up with everything. But as much as it's an interesting insight. I don't know if you guys have ever been like this, but we are quite stubborn. We tend to want to learn to do everything ourselves and not always get the advice. And we don't always want to pay for it, but sometimes it helps, even if it's like marketing or something. There's so much that we can be doing, but we don't. And even in the legal services space, the psychology of it is quite interesting. People have an aversion to legal services. They don't like it, and they don't understand it. It can be off-putting and expensive, and sometimes they may have experienced something in the property space, like a boundary dispute or a divorce, and then they end up having an aversion to getting their corporate or commercial legal advice, but it's completely separate. So it's just something that I've had to sort of work through with a few people, and our feedback has shown this with our research, is that our clients almost have to take a step back and realize that they may have like psychological barriers to getting legal advice, which is quite a funny one. But anyway, it's like one of those high priority, low priority things. People know how much they need it, but they do their best somehow to avoid it. Or they end up doing templates, and templates can take a heck of a long time to get right. And often we don't get them right. I'll talk to you about the case studies in a minute on that one. But go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, it was just a quick one, and you may cover it in the case studies. But I'm a tech guy by background, but I also trained to be a commercial mediator.
Okay.
And I got into some very interesting discussions with various law firms who basically hate mediation, because it turns a long, expensive court case into a one-day process, very, very cheap. So they didn't really like it. But then you get into discussion about this trend that as the world becomes more efficient, lawyers could do their work more efficiently, sometimes help with technology. And again, they didn't like that because it was reducing their fees.
Yeah.
So, but some of them then switched into pure product basis. In other words, pay by results. I think the most extreme example, I was talking to the CFO of Cisco Systems. I mean, big. And he basically said, we're dealing with these law firms who are spending 30, 40 million a year with them, but they're choosing which cases they prosecute in court versus mediate or just say, you know what, just settle.
Right.
And his frustration was that they could turn the dial on the time. So he said, look, let's do a deal. I will give you 20 million a year to handle all of our legal aspects. You choose how you prosecute them, whether you settle, whether you mediate, whether you take it to court. In other words, you're motivated to do it the cheapest possible way. That gives you more profit. I, the client, get a fixed cost to having all my legal stuff done. And he said it worked out really well. And they, after they got their head around it, they thought we could make more money this way, because they were being motivated by profit, not time. So I don't know whether you see that trend as well. So that's the world's longest question, but
oh, not at all. Well, yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I think one of the things that I've noticed is there's an all or nothing attitude to innovation in legal services. Some businesses will be, and look, I don't know as much as other people who cover this as their specialization, but the feedback I've had is that people are, no, I'm not going to innovate. I'm going to stay traditional because of X, Y, or Z. When in fact, all you need to do is a carve out. If you've got 10 employees and you've got a couple of people who are more entrepreneurial, get them working on something else, build a business on the side. There's always parallels with what we do. And like you've described, there's always something, an alternative way. It can be done under a completely separate brand or banner or carve out or venture. And, why not? If you want to hedge your bets and possibly, we're working with someone, we're trying to collaborate, and they were quite rigid, but they were great people, but quite rigid. The opportunity that we were proposing would end up with multiple times the revenue that they're currently earning, but for some reason they couldn't wrap their heads around it. So if they can't, can someone else help them do it? There's so many opportunities we all might be presented with, but for whatever reason we might not see why they're good, and I find that quite interesting. But you've obviously seen some cool stuff as well.
Yeah, well, thanks.
Nice one. Paul.
Hi guys, sorry if you're about to cover this. I guess just with a group of startups, and I think some are further along the journey than others. But what, if you were able to distill it, Ian, would be recommendations to startups around what legal services you absolutely need to engage with right here, right now, at the start, rather than regret it further down the line.
I'll try and do this one in a snapshot. So whatever regulations apply to the business, whatever you do and industry and things you're in, there's going to be some kind of regulations that apply. Understanding what those are and tackling them is essential. And then you've got a few levels. So you've got your data protection stuff. There's some very simple things like registering with the Information Commissioner's Office every year, which is a mandatory requirement. Having the right data protection policies in place. Privacy policy, even if you don't have a website, you still need a privacy statement or policy. Your website cookie compliance, so banner and settings and cookie policy, all legal requirements. And then whatever transfers of data around you and other people that you work with and things like that, you need to cover all of that stuff. So that's your level of data protection. Then you've got your middle section, which is all your trading agreements, not a legal requirement necessarily, unless there are regulatory aspects that need to be covered in those agreements. But you need to have agreements with customers, suppliers, influencers, marketers, subcontractors, whatever, all of that stuff, even if it's the very most basic stuff. But in those, limiting liability, protecting your IP and confidential information are some examples of stuff that can be done. So when I collaborate with people, I sometimes only have 5 lines in an initial thing, which sets out England and Wales as the jurisdiction and English law, limit my liability to X, and then various very basic things. That alone has the effect of mitigating your risk. People sometimes think, oh, it's going to be 10 pages. It could just be a quick email with key stuff, but unless you know what to put in there, you're not going to know. And then your corporate stuff, are there any business partners involved? Getting that stuff ironed out, or understanding what you want to do and being clear on the vision of each of the people involved, so that you can make sure everything's aligned and getting the advice, ASAP. And then I guess the last thing is, depending on what your plans are, it helps having some visibility as to like what the costs are going to be and the avenues available to you to get the contracts and stuff in place for fundraising and things. Just knowing what that could be all about. And then the last thing is your trademark stuff. So before you even set foot online, set a footprint or whatever, you need to know if you're going to step on anyone's toes with their rights. And we've seen this numerous times. Sometimes you can fly under the radar, but people don't always do a full sweep of trademark holders and other people who use brands who aren't registered trademark holders, but still use those brands in your space, and understanding your risk. Those are the key things to think about in a snapshot, which you probably knew about all of that, much of it already, but at least we got that one. Shall I do some case study stuff? Let's have a look here. Might do some AI stuff as well, but yeah, so trademarks, case studies. So someone's built up a brand, a client of mine built up a brand, and trades in different territories, and turns out that they'd been trading in one territory where there was another registered trademark holder for quite some time, like years. And there's the various, I'm not a specialist in this area, but obviously, first of all, you don't want to be doing that. A proper sweep of what else is happening in that territory is essential. But if you've gone and then made lots of money using a brand, you might end up with someone knocking on your door. And with trademark and IP stuff, some people have a legitimate basis to stop you or give you a hard time. Some don't have a legitimate basis, but want to give you a hard time anyway. And some people think they do, but don't, and will give you a hard time. So you end up with problems. So that's something to look at. One thing which is quite interesting is on the business model front and payment terms and arrangements, we'll sometimes, because we'll be dealing with lots of marketing agencies, a lot of them will have, just for example, and other tech businesses and consultancies and things, but the same business with a similar degree of traction or, traction in the market will be doing things completely differently. So one might be doing payment at the end of the month. One might be doing quarterly in advance, and they're roughly the same business. So what's the difference? One somehow managed to arrange things so that they're getting paid fully in advance. Some people take deposits months in advance of starting work. Other people take payment in arrears. Same business, completely different cash flow. Something to look at, I think. And then, so this one was an IP mistake. Startup platform involving various, it's like a marketplace platform, and they engaged a corporate, like quite a big corporate, to sponsor them and to be on the platform. And their contract, this was the first big client that they landed, their contract required my client to transfer all their intellectual property involved with that arrangement to that corporate. So their whole business was basically ruined from day one. No worries, Graham, have a good one. And I say I'm being a bit dramatic, but you get my drift. What seems to have happened is that whoever put that contract together, if we give them the benefit of the doubt, let's say that they did it by mistake, because who would try and do that to a startup of great lads trying to build a business, and lads and lasses, and basically they've taken it looks like possibly a different type of contract that shouldn't have been used, and they've used it by mistake. Who knows why that happened, how, why, what, because if they did it on purpose, that's quite malicious. Let's have a look here. Okay, often we find that people use, for instance, a pro-client contract instead of a pro-supplier contract. So people will be working with, they'll come to us and be like, yeah, we've been trading for 10 months, and now we want to upgrade because we've got this new big client. Here's our contract. Can you help us update it a bit? And I'm going, well, hang on, this is the wrong way around. Like everything has gone against you. So for the next however many years, if anything ever goes wrong, all that risk is weighted on that supplier, on my clients, because obviously that stuff sticks around for years, you know, in terms of the length of time people can bring a claim against you and stuff like that. So, you know, what are they doing? Do they need to set up a new company? So just evaluating that, if you're going to be raising money or collaborating or bringing on investors and things like that, you know, obviously they need to do due diligence on you. But if it turns out you've been like completely negligent as a director to put together the wrong contracts, then you've got to bear in mind what the implications might be. Contracts with no limitation of liability clauses. It's quite an easy one to check, to just check if it's there. That'll be a good thing to do. And on that psychology front, interestingly, we've had a few people who've had things like that or the wrong jurisdiction, and then we've said, we'll happily change it for you, and they just disappear. Or they say they don't want to change it. And the question is why? I mean, I don't know if I'm that off-putting, but you know what I mean? Like some people really have an aversion. If you tell them what's wrong with their contracts, they will immediately freeze up and vanish, which is an interesting dynamic. B2B versus B2C, sometimes people use them the wrong way around. But of course, if you have consumer customers, you need to have all the statutory stuff in there to make sure that you're compliant and to make sure that your contract is enforceable. Like obviously none of this is legal advice because it all depends on the circumstances and things like that, but that's just a general overview. If you have consumer stuff, you need consumer clauses.
Ian.
Yo.
Thank you very much for this. It's been tremendous. Have we got any questions for him whilst we've got him with us this morning? Any additional questions? Because a lot of this. Go on, Mark.
Yeah, a little one. It's and you maybe I'll cover it. I'm a huge fan of checklists because checklists to me are condensed wisdom, grown over time of all the things that went wrong. And I was wondering if one of the things you offer is if you like a legal health check, driven off your own checklists, where you can go through and say, here are the the health check is a good way to put it, where you can go through and say, have you got this? Have you got that? Have you thought about that? And if one comes up with, oh shit, no, never thought about that, you've just saved a huge ton of pain and grief down the road. So I could see a situation where, and I would happily come to you and say, you give us a health check, and that'll cost probably a fixed sum. And at the end of it, you can say, okay, you're in great shape. The only thing you need to worry about is this. We can help you with that. Or you've got 2 or 3 big problems, and this is roughly how you should approach them and how you should budget to do that.
Yeah, brilliant point. You know what, we could do better. We've got a basic one, but we actually need to make it more comprehensive. So I've made a note actually. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Yeah, no worries.
I hope I'm not boring everyone to death with the.
No, that is a superb point, Mark, because a lot of the policy stuff you mentioned earlier, particularly around privacy and cookie stuff, can often get overlooked. Particularly with all of the raising money, getting traction, marketing, busy lives. So if that was a service you could offer, Ian, you go out, send a health check list out to startups. Have you got all this in play? And if you haven't, speak to me what you haven't got in play. That's going to make a healthier ecosystem right there.
Yeah,
brilliant.
I'm happy to be your first customer.
Amazing. All right, I'll get something together. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Very good idea. That I like that.